Lori has approved that, so I'm letting you know we're live streaming.
Susan will begin to love me.
Okay. I guess we need this for the Zoom. Yeah, okay. Can you hear me okay? All right. So I just wanted to run down real quickly what the last year has looked like. It has evolved immensely and continues to evolve, and I think that's always the work of the Holy Spirit, right? I am Deaconess Lori Wilbert. Where am I looking? Anywhere? Hello? Looks like a hidden camera, like they have in the joint, watching your every move. So it's great to be back at King of Glory and bring you an update for the last year. My name is Deaconess Lori Wilbert. I've been doing prison ministry in ministry 38 years, in prison 34. But I'm actually not in prison right now. I continue to teach from the home office, and let me explain why. So during COVID, obviously we were not allowed in, anybody, but it evolved to where now the COVID restrictions are lifted, but they're concentrating on college programming. It's going to morph into a prison that is just centered on that kind of programming. So no one else that I know of is still teaching like I am any other programming there. I know they've opened up a couple Bible studies on the weekend, but class-wise during the week, mine is yet, along with the college programming that has started there. North Park Seminary and Northwestern, and I think one of the Illinois universities. So they have decreased the population to even less than half. I think they want to get it down to 800 or so. And it was a facility when I started in 1986 that held 3,800 people. So it is changing as we speak. And in order for me to pick up my programming there now, they'd have to have classroom space, and they don't. So Laura, the head of education, said, just keep running it the way you're running it. We went from 1 class to 2 classes this spring. They're full, they're going well. And it's interesting because even though I'm not in the classroom with them, sometimes their assignments reveal even more. I think they can be a little more personal because they're not airing their stuff in front of the other students. So when I get my packet, we send them back every other week. I'll get 2 packets with the 2 class assignments, and then I send them back with the next assignments, and I have to read through them. And let me tell you, it takes days if you really want to spend time with them and then comment accordingly on the things that they're saying. There's a lot of depth to these assignments. I've brought some along because I would really like you to read and see what they're going through and how they're answering these things. So it's been very rich. The 2 books that I've used recently, I brought them along, and the basic curriculum is still Houses of Healing, which is a curriculum that involves nonviolence training, restorative justice, owning what you've done, parenting from behind the wall, addictions and recovery, and then what does this journey look like in light of your faith and faith walk with God? So from that has come these 2 groups, and the first book I put them through after that is Looking for God in Messy Places by Jake Owensby, and I followed that up with A Resurrection-Shaped Life by Jake Owensby. And both books have really resonated with my students, particularly this one, Looking for God in Messy Places. And it's just what it says. It's where do we find God? We don't find him in the cleansed, clean places of life. We find him in the dirty places. We find him in the muddy places, when we're down and out, when we're rolling around in the muck and we don't know which end is up. That's when many times God is most clearly seen, I think, for all of us, not just people incarcerated. So they've been a real find and a nice addition to Houses of Healing curriculum to evolve into that. So, and I was pleased when she had enough students. The old group wanted to continue, so I found this next book, and then there was a new group that wanted to start. So it works well. You start, and then they follow up with this. And if this group wants to continue, I have another book ready to go for them. So we will see how this works out with classes, and what happens with Stateville. The head chaplain is now gone. There's a new assistant chaplain who will be the head very shortly. And I don't know, the shape of things is changing for sure. So when my ex-offender ministry really started to take off this last year or two, I had written Henry. Henry was a gentleman that I knew at Stateville for many years, and then when he went to be released after 48 years, the feds picked him up on an old warrant from 1973, and he had to do 2 more. 50 years, this gentleman did. And I do believe it was a wrongful conviction, but there was no DNA back in 1971, so he was never exonerated. Henry D. was a force for good behind the wall. He was one of the first guys I got to know when I first came there, with Bob Kramer, Chaplain Kramer, who trained me from the Lutheran Church District Office. And he was a gift all of those years to me and to all of those who did time with him. So when he was released after 48 years, we were all like, yay, he's going home, yay. And he walked out the door, and staff saw the feds there, and they said, what's up? And they're like, well, we got an old warrant. We have to take him. Not only did they take him, they hid him. And that's what the feds are known for doing. They literally, it's just their system. They didn't, it's just the way they operate. He was in Oklahoma, he said, then he was out in Delaware. No one knew where he was. We were all trying to find him. We wanted to write him and, tell him, stay encouraged, just to keep him on our radar. And it took almost 8 months before one of the lieutenants stopped me in the hallway and said, I found him. He's in Pennsylvania. And I started writing him. And he was so relieved. He goes, thank you, Jesus, someone found me. And I said, well, I got a couple of friends to start writing him. And after he passed away this summer, they were so grateful. They said, thank you for bringing Henry into our lives. He was such a joy to know. So when he was getting ready to get out, the feds didn't want to pay for having his toes amputated. So that was a good reason to release him. So he came out already with toes needing to be amputated a year ago in June. And as he was getting ready to go, I had been writing him, and I gave him my phone number, and I said, call me. When you get out, I will help you. I have churches behind me. I know they will support this. And I was on my way home for Father's Day weekend last year, and I pick up the phone, and he says, Lori? I go, yeah. It's Henry. I'm out. And I said, no way. And we talked almost all the way home, and he was filling me in on his that he got out and what the journey was like and how precarious it was. And it was funny because he said, I've never flown, and they had to fly me from Pennsylvania back to Chicago because that's where my parole would be for the next year. And so I kept saying to the officers, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to get on an airplane. And yeah, you'll be all right. You'll be okay. And all this good stuff. And then finally, he gets to the airport and he sees the cop and he says, I'll ask him. And then he started laughing. He goes, isn't that funny? So that was how it started. And it evolved through the year. We talked, every other day it seemed. He was calling about, what about this and what about that and how do I do this and how do I do that? And he was at the Salvation Army, and then he ended up at the Mission Boulevard, which I cannot say enough about. The Mission Boulevard took him in October, November. It would have been after I was here last year. And they are a mission that takes in people who are leaving the hospital but are homeless. And because of his toes, he got in. He got in just by a hair. two other guys were sent there, and they declined, and so the caseworker said, we can take him. And thank God, because the Salvation Army where he was ready to boot him out and put him in Pacific Guard and missions, which is not a good place for someone who is in need of medical attention and care. So the good Lord intervened, and as it was, I was talking to the chaplain who I knew from Stateville, who was also the chaplain at this facility, who takes in guys coming home from prison. Tyrone Skaggs, I think was his name. And Tyrone said, I agree with you, Lori, he can't go there. That's not a good place for him, so I'm gonna do what I can. So Tyrone did his part too, and there was just a lot of prayers answered. Then Jacob came on the scene. Jacob had done 9 years with him as his cellie at Stateville, so I had known both Jacob and Henry. And Jacob's actually, he was exonerated. He did have a wrongful conviction and got out after 21 years. And so Jacob helped him get into that mission as well. And then from Jacob, I got to know others came along. He'd call me and he'd say, Jacob would say, so-and-so wants to talk to you. I vetted them. Is it okay if they call you? I go, well, as long as you vetted them. I don't want just anyone. He's like, no, I'm only going to send you the guys that you can trust. So the door started opening to working with more people coming home from the streets and basically just hooking them up with, resources or giving them good counsel, prayers and spiritual guidance, whatever it was they were looking for. But the walk with Henry was intense because this guy, he made an impression on everyone he met along the way, not just me, but he made an impression on everyone at that Mission Boulevard, Salvation Army where he left, and then there was some kind of organization, another ex-offender, Andre, helped him get money together so that he could get an apartment in Midlothian that helps guys coming out of prison. And then I went to St. Paul's Matson and said, can you help me furnish the apartment? And so we got all kinds of stuff together and we got it ready for him, and towels and linens, and I absconded my neighbor and a couple other people, and we went over there and got it all made up for him. And he came down from the mission that day and he sat in a corner, and I'll never forget it. He had tears rolling down his face and he said, my place. This is going to be my place. A guy who had not had his own place for 50 years was going to have, and it was just a small efficiency, but it had what he needed. And he was laughing because I was putting personal touches. I had a cross on the wall. I had some flowers in another place, and my neighbor had brought some colorful things, and he's like, I don't know, this is looking more and more like home, but it's definitely got a lady's touch to it. I said, that's right, and it needs it. Because I kept laughing at him because I said, when I first called you to say, what colors do you like? He said, gray, white, black. I go, no, that's not going to cut it. No. And I said, how about some, just some vibrancy, a red, purple, green. Oh, yeah. And then I said, teal. He goes, what's teal? And I said, bluish green. Yeah, teal. And so that was really we touched it up with teal. We found a teal tablecloth and teal bed sheets, and that was as colorful as we could get with him. But he never got to move in because right after we furnished it in April, he kept getting one toe, half a toe, another toe, and pretty soon his whole left foot was almost gone. And I went down to see him at the hospital. Humboldt Old Norwegian Hospital in the city is now Humboldt Park Hospital, Humboldt Park Hospital Care Center or something like that. But they take in people who don't have anywhere else to go. I mean, this is where you're going to get medical care. So when I walked in there that day, it reminded me of Old Cook County. And I walked in and I went, well, I wonder how good the care is. It wasn't the cleanest place, but they were on it. The care and compassion from that staff were on it. It was like they weren't just nurses and doctors. It was a mission for them. And I saw how they cared for Henry. And Henry had done his magic with his staff because I could tell they all loved him too, and came in and were, what do you need? What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. And when I came in that day, the nurse had come in and said, this is what's going on, but I think he'll be okay. He's sepsis again, but we're working on it, and he should be out of here this week. We're going to send him to a rehab center, which he did not want, but I said, no, that's where you're going to have to go. Well, I'll come. Just do what they say. And one of the things that they had said was you need to get the fluid off your lungs, so we're going to have to do that needle procedure. Well, that was the thing. I left that Sunday, and Monday they were supposed to do it, and they did not. Tuesday, I got sick and couldn't get back down there. And by Wednesday, his lungs had really filled up. So when I called several times, they were like, well, we're trying to do the procedure, but it's getting more difficult. And I was like, oh, this is not good. Then all of a sudden, he was in ICU. I called the nurse 10 o'clock that night. She put the phone to his ear, and I was able to tell him, I love you, Henry. He could barely talk. I love you too, Lori. You're gonna be okay. Either way this goes. Yeah, I know. And so I got up at 4 o'clock the next day to drive into the city to see him. And the good Lord called him home at 6:22. And they called us right away to tell us. So Jacob, Andre, I had to really work with. They took it really, really hard because, after doing 50, just not even a year and a month, and that was it. But I really hammered home to them both. We were at the funeral home planning the funeral because there was no next of kin, and that Henry often talked about the Good Shepherd. He loved talking about Jesus as the Good Shepherd. In fact, when he would write me from the feds, he would draw the Good Shepherd on his envelope, inside his cards, and he would talk about the Good Shepherd's got me. The Good Shepherd has me, Lord. I know the Good Shepherd is with me. There's a picture he sent me, one with Travis, his Sally, who I now write. I've inherited Travis. And another gentleman on this side. And here's Henry in the middle, just looking up like this. It's a picture I treasure. Henry was always faith-filled, but those last 2 years really took a toll. How did that happen? That you'd get picked up on an old warrant? Why did God allow that? And it took my toes coming off for me to come home, and a lot of why? We ask God why this needless suffering? We don't know, but the faith that he had sustained him. God sustained him. When Pastor Tracer and I did the funeral just a month ago, we talked about the Good Shepherd. And there was word had gotten out on the street that Henry had died, and so there was a nice number of ex-offenders that filled the back of the church. And we were really able to talk about his faith and what that meant and what the Good Shepherd is to us. So I feel like it came full circle. Was a real confirmation of, why am I still doing this? Henry D. If for no other reason than Henry D. So, and through now Henry, who brought all walks of life together, didn't discriminate. He talked to anybody, everybody was his friend. And the gentleman that I have met through this whole thing, we are still working together on different things, different projects, helping different guys coming home. So I see that as a possibility now for others coming along, maybe a Bible study at some point that I could do with guys coming out. We shall see. So that has been a lovely development in the ministry and opened some new doors. The other thing I would tell you is I still do mailings. I started those during COVID to other facilities where my students had transferred, and I still do those, and in addition to at federal places. Prison one is his old Sally Travis. And then the other thing that, before we get to their assignments, that I wanted to talk about was a possibility of this fall, winter semester at River Forest training church workers to do this kind of work. So Pastor Buss had asked a couple of years ago, well, who's the next in line? And I had said, I don't know, but if you send someone from the SEM or a pastor who's interested, I can train them like Bob trained me. And so that never evolved. But then when I talked to Chris Whitby, Pastor Whitby is the assistant to Pastor Buss, he was all over it. He said, I think now that the district office is located at River Forest on Monroe Street, it's a house that they sold the office on Wolf, and they have a house now on Monroe. And so they've pared down. It's 3 or 4 staff only there, and I think they're going to be working, a lot of them remotely, as they have been. But it'll save money, the district money. And so Pastor Whitby said, when I'm on campus and I have interaction with church worker students, I could bring this up. We could maybe develop something here and let it grow and see what happens. So to me, it's a no-brainer. If you want to plant the seeds of correctional ministry and work, go to where the church workers are training, right? Plant the seeds and see who might be interested so that when they get their call and in their community will be a jail or prison, they could then grow some ministry there. So that's an exciting prospect, and I hope that that does evolve into something really meaningful for those students. So the other thing I wanted to do for you, does the next service start at 10:30? 10:45, okay. Is I Xeroxed off, I took 3 of my students and took some of their assignments, and I would like to just read through them, and I would like to start with Mr. Daniel. He is quite impressive. So you can follow along, but I would like someone to read. Who would like to volunteer to read this first one? Anybody? Sure, okay. Okay, sure. No, you. So this is from the Resurrection book. I believe this is, where is it? God in messy places. Well, it's 1 and 2. And what they were to do, so I developed a curriculum around the book. I read the chapter and I come up with the questions, and usually ask them to do something in 3 to 5 short paragraphs to really get them involved in the question. I want them to spend time with it. So that's why you will often see do this in 3 to 5. And so maybe what you could do is read that question, and then the answer.
All right, on page 126, the author says, "There is more to our earthly existence than meets the eye. From the depths of our messy places, someone is reaching out to us, seeking to connect to us, transform us, and guide us in healing the whole creation. Write a short essay in the following space that explains how you understand this for your own life. Do this in 3 to 5 short paragraphs. Hint, if you are having difficulty with this, think of a time when you realized God was with you in a messy place of your life and how he transformed the bad into good." So this is what he wrote. "God was seeking me out the day I became aware of this class. A rough day of research in the law library, which can sometimes be discouraging, had befell me. I've seen the application on the wall for, quote, House of Healing, end quote. I spoke to Miss Constable. Okay. She said she'd lend an endorsement and I should be enrolled shortly. That simple. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I always seek God and places to grow my spiritual maturity. Growing my spiritual maturity is an understatement. This book has been mind-blowing. It's so genuine, so deep, so truthful, so relatable, to name a few. Sorry. I've taken away so much. Now that's a profound example of God turning a bad into good. I've thoroughly enjoyed the class and I want to own the book. Happy face.
Thank you. Sometimes it's hard to read their writing.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Sorry.
tough. You did great. Daniel has been a surprise. I did not know him when I was at Stateville, and he has come up with some profound statements. Mr. Diaz, on the other hand, I have known for many years. He opted to join the class. Susan, do you mind? When it became available to his constable. And while she's passing these out, that's the other real blessing. Miss Constable agreed during COVID that she would run the class. If she hadn't done that, my program would have been done there. And we had known each other behind the wall because I always taught back in the education building. And she said to the warden, I'll run this class. It's substance, and the men need it. It resonates with them. So because she stood up and said that, the class was running. The chaplaincy department wasn't willing to do it. So God always provides a way, makes a way, and provides a way. Just when you think things are ending, there's new beginnings. That's my takeaway from that. Okay, who would like to read this? Great. Same question, but different gentleman. Again, Diaz has been with me in the program for probably 6 or 7 years. He's hung in there.
When I was sent to prison, I could not see anything but bad things happening all around me and to other people. In my mind, but this was to do all the many stories I had heard growing up. So for a while, I was closed-minded to the many possibilities that could be afforded to me in here, like coming to know who I am as a person and who I can become just being in this class along with having given me so much insight about myself and the world around me. I've come a long way from who I used to be and what I believe is possible for my life now, even in here. I'm looking at people's places and things differently now. I not only know changes can be made if you really want them to. Participating in this class has really helped me to.
I'm not sure.
Okay. Has really helped me a lot, and I would like to continue as long as you will have me.
Thank you. You figured that one out, yeah. Got to decipher sometimes. And Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker, I got to know, he's been with me now the last 2 years. She sent me good students and vetted them for me as well. So whenever she'd send me a student, she'd say, you know, they don't meet the criteria for any of the college programs. So I'm not sure why you'd have criteria for college programs in a prison if you don't want everybody in the college program. So they were eliminating students left and right. She'd send them my way, and I said, yeah, give them to me. And they all came, and they've been excellent. So I think the difference between my stuff and their stuff is theirs is academic, whereas mine is dealing with their stuff. And that makes all the difference in the world. So that's another reason she's been a cheerleader for this programming, because she sees that it hits the mark for a lot of these guys. You can get all the academics you want in there, but if they don't deal with their stuff, it doesn't do a whole lot of good. Sue, do you mind reading? Yeah. I know, start with that if you would.
The author says, my premise all along has been that hope arises from our awareness that God loves us and is always with us, whether up or down, on a roll or on the ropes. Page 32, the author says, having hope involves discerning a purpose in life. Reread the second full paragraph and think about this statement. After taking this course and reflecting on the assignments you have been given, have you come to understand God's purpose for your life? Use the space below to answer in 3 paragraphs. I'm still trying to understand God's purpose for me. I have just started this walk with God and learning to open my mind and heart to Him. Every day there is a lesson to be learned about the events of the day. God puts courses in your life on a daily basis to open your eyes to see if you caught them. I want to learn more of God's purpose for me. I want to be able to pick up on things that God put in my life daily. I want Him in my mind and in my heart now. I want Him to come into me and stay there for the rest of my life. I want to be able to tell my children and grandchildren of the wonderful things God has for me. By the end of these courses and the end of this book, it has given me a better understanding of something that I learned. Thank you for every lesson, the first book and this book. I pray the next course will be just as helpful as these 2. Wow.
Yeah. That these are testimony to the fact that you hear these, you read this stuff and you're like, are these guys locked up? You know, it really, it shows you again, there's no little difference sometimes between us and those behind the wall. We're all looking for the same thing. Reassurance from our God every day that He is with us and walks with us on our journey. So when I read these assignments, I'm just reminded again and again and again of God's faithfulness in all things at all times, no matter what. Back to Mr. Daniel. Do you mind passing off this time? I won't make you get up again, Sue. So we're back to Mr. Daniel. And who would like to volunteer this time? Mr. Barrow, are you volunteering? Thank you. If you don't mind doing this question and that one.
Okay, and then reading the responses?
Yes.
On page 111, the author says that Jesus is inviting us to participate in His life. When we love, Christ Himself, is welling up within us, overflowing into the world, and transforming our souls in the process. That is what Christ was getting at when He called Himself the true vine. The risen Christ abides in us, and we abide in Him. On page 112, 113, the author speaks to us about being exposed. When we let down our guard to God and allow Him to work within us, and realize we cannot hide our craziness, our chaos, our messiness, our beauty, our dark side, our light side, when we are most vulnerable and fragile, that is where God meets us. That is where God meets us. Not in the cleaned up version of ourselves that we like to portray to the world, but the whole self, dirt and all. That is where God can become most real. How do you understand? You want me to read the answers in? Mm-hmm. How do you understand this? I understand this as saying that apart from God, we are nothing. Just as the text says, away from the vine, the branch will wither and die. The reoccurring theme is that we must love all others in all situations. The only way this is possible is to abide in Christ Jesus, early and often. We are nothing without the vine. Right now, God is showing Himself. It doesn't get too much more messy. But I feel loved by God, my family, and friends more than ever. God is strengthening me. My knowledge and wisdom is growing exponentially. I feel the love in all my relationships, I'm truly humbled, and I'm sure the Bible says those that humble themselves will be exalted. I feel it, I believe it.
Thank you. And one last one. Thank you. Again, back to Mr. Perkins. I had so many more, and I had to pare it down last night. Like, well, we don't have all morning, but I tried to pick the cream of the crop here. And then you get an idea, too, of the curriculum itself, which is, again, another fun challenge for me. I love taking a book like this, reading it again, and then parsing out thoughtful questions that you can develop a curriculum around. And it really has evolved into something solid for the guys, because the responses show that it does bring it out in them, you know, their faith walk, their life, what they're struggling with. And again, sometimes you hear some things that they probably would not have said out loud in class in front of others. And that's the only way, when we face our truth, to really deal with stuff too. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I must have been late last night. I wasn't drinking either. Okay, I'll just read this next one then. What is God's dream for you? That's question 4. Reread page 129 and answer. How can you imagine life making a difference in the lives of others? Imagine means to dream or think of the possibilities. I have to say that a lot. A lot of the men are very, can't think outside the box. Sometimes you have to challenge them. I want you to use your imagination and really go there. And I find that a real challenge for probably a lot of people have that as well. But I think behind the wall, because it's such a stiff box you're in, literally, it is hard when I say imagine the possibilities for them sometimes to really go there. So I do that a lot. Use your imagination. Just think, what could be the possibilities here? He answered, I'm not sure of God's dream for me. I'd say it's for me to love more than anything else and love others as myself. We talked a lot about that in these last 2 books. How do you love others? It's a hard place to do that. You know, when you got an officer screaming at you, or someone trying, your cellie ripping you off, you know, and I'm preaching, love, you got to love them no matter what. That's a hard one to swallow. It's a challenge for any of us. I imagine my life making a huge difference. God has blessed me with an unbelievable education. I'm nearing a bachelor's in social entrepreneurship. I'm not sure if that's something he's doing online or through the mail, probably. Well, I don't know. My vision is to build homes that will be used as affordable housing units for poor families. I plan to take at Promise youth in the process and teach valuable job skills and life skills. I want to be trustworthy, reliable, and a loving figure in as many lives as I can. This is my dream that I will give all to bring to fruition. That was a stunning dream. And it really captured me. And I thought, wow, he's really thinking outside the box. If I can go home one day, this is what I will do. So that's what, you know, when people say, do they really listen? Do they pay attention? Are they, you know, invested in this kind of education, not just academics, but this? And I would wholeheartedly say yes. In all my years of teaching Houses of Healing and now these other books, that we give them something to hang on to and to grow in and to think about beyond themselves. And, you know, prison is such an insular place. It's easy just to think about yourself and your own woes and worries and troubles, and it's hard to think about other people in need. And I can remember having discussions in classroom setting while I was there about people who, yeah, you complain about the food, but you know right now in the city there's people living under a bridge who would die to have that meal. And it would, you know, check their perspective immediately. You know that there's people who don't even have a safe place to sleep tonight I know you're in prison, but you've got a hot cot, and we'd have those kind of honest discussions, and they'd be able to start to think about the world, and then we'd start to talk about other things going on, not just in the United States, but around the world, and what third world countries are dealing with, and the hardships that are there. And once they started connecting those dots, you started to see empathy being created. And that's what makes us human beings. When we can say, I feel for that next person and the pain that they're going through. Now we are more human. We are growing that love that Christ says to have. And that's when it starts to make sense to love everybody, no matter what. So I used to, after I would have them for a whole year, I would just put the letter E on the board and I would say, what word am I looking for? And if they would all shout out empathy, then I knew they had been listening. Because without that ability, none of us can become full, mature human beings. Okay, so thank you for reading, the readers. Do you have any questions at this point? So it was a wrongful conviction, I'm convinced. It was a murder charge. But there was no DNA back in 1971, so there was never any way that any attorney who took the case could work on it. So. Yeah, it's a maximum security prison. It's still classified max. It's going to be probably soon max medium. But yeah, Stateville was always a maximum security prison. Class X, yeah. Anybody else?
Do you ever actually anticipate being able to get that?
I'm going to see how this evolves with this teaching at Concordia. And I want to see how the ex-offender ministry evolves. Because if it does, then I can't go back in if I'm working with ex-offenders. It's got to be one or the other with my ID. At this point, John, I'm probably looking at more on the outside, evolving.
Do they do any type of, all of your contact now with them is via mail?
Yeah.
Do they do any type of Zoom?
Yes, they're growing that capacity. So that's a good question, because one of the schools donated equipment to do Zoom, and at some point, if they want to make this a program facility, you're going to have to bring that in if you really want a lot of teachers involved. So if that would, be, that college only let their teachers use it, obviously. Because Laura mentioned it, but she said right now they're only letting their professors use it. But she said the day may come when we get it in for everybody that wants to do some kind of programming from the streets. So that is a possibility. And I would definitely be all over that. That'd be nice to do.
Well, you know, if their intention is really to change people's lives, they may really be given all the opportunities to do that. It certainly seems that some type of Zoom type thing, we've actually seen one another.
Right. If you're going to build this as a program facility, see, they've waffled. So during COVID, it was just shut down. Then they slowly lifted the restrictions, and then they were thinking, the wheels were turning. I could see things were changing on the horizon, because then they were saying, oh, we're going to make it a program facility. So they started moving guys out. And then all of a sudden, someone said, no, changed their mind. It's going to be a max. They started bringing guys back in. Now they're saying, no, we're going to get them out of here again, and they are. I can't imagine if you're in that population, back and forth, back and forth. They're moving them again. Now they're serious about this is going to be a program facility. Well, then, yeah, you do have to have equipment like that. It would make sense. If you're going to really build this as a program facility and no longer Stateville since 1923, maximum security prison. So it's the powers that be are always clashing. You have, it's security versus programming. The security is saying, and program people are saying, we need to do, we need to figure this out. So they're constantly like this. And the director took over about 7 years ago, and I see him going in the program direction. But if he leaves that position and they get another person in, he could say, nope, back to security. It's always been like that. It goes back and forth, and it depends on who's running it. I'd like to think at this juncture, Illinois is moving towards more programming. But we shall see. Time will tell. You have to be able to be flexible and land on your feet as this thing evolves. And thank God I've had Laura. Yeah, I think I have been. You had a hand up back there? Oh, okay. Yep.
You said that Stateville, they were trying to get down to about 800.
Yeah.
One, what was it before? And two, where are all these people going?
Yeah, so when I started in '86, it was anywhere between 3,400 and 3,600. At its max, it was almost 3,800, and it was crowded. It was way overcrowded, but that was the '80s. Then in the '90s, it was more like about 3,400, and then right before I left, pre-COVID, they halved it, and it went to 1,600. Oh well, they farm them out to other institutions in the state of Illinois. And so then when Laura said a year ago, when they first decided, oh, it's going to be program, and they got them down to 851, I said, where are they? And she's like, well, now they're in all these other institutions in Illinois, and there's overcrowding in some of the other places. Lawrenceville, Menard are the other two maxes, and then there's a lot of medium places. So they had to designate, your designation depended on where you went. So now, then she said, no, they changed their mind again. They're bringing them back. And now recently she said, no, we're going back to the program. I don't think they know what they want half the time. So right now, we'll see. They had their first college graduation. It hit the Tribune. It was on the news in May. Northwestern graduated a group, and North Park Seminary graduated a group. So this was a big deal. So I think that's when the forces that be in Springfield said, oh, well, maybe we will become a program again. And, my rock has been Laura saying, just keep it coming. Let's just keep it going. It's going strong, and just to the rest. So we'll see.
At the other facilities around the state, the other prisons, are there individuals such as yourself that are doing the same type of work?
I don't know, because I think it changes a lot, John. I know that other districts are not as involved as we have been over the years. Southern Illinois had a few programs going on. Central, I don't think as much anymore. District, LCMS. But we always had a really strong presence at Stateville and other facilities up here. So in terms of parallel work with a curriculum like Houses of Healing, I don't know. I don't know. And I have found out, though, that there are staff people now in prisons that are teaching Houses of Healing, which is tremendous. It needs to be taught. The thing we bring to it is our faith in Jesus Christ. I mean, that spiritual component is pretty strong in my class. So when it's taught by staff, it's still a solid curriculum. It's helping men look at their stuff. It's good. And the last chapter is, where is God in this? So it depends on the teacher what she does with that, or he does with that component. Yeah.
You could be taking a personal involvement in going to the seminary and talking to future DC.
Well, River Forest. Yeah. So there's pre-sem, deaconess, and DCEs. So. Well, Pastor Chris Whitby is working on it. So we just talked 2 weeks ago, and that was the latest proposal. How do we incorporate this into their classes? Do we do a weekend seminar? Do I come on a regular basis? What does this look like? I don't know. But Pastor Chris was going to work on it and see what we could come up with. I agree. When I think of how Bob trained me, Bob was so gracious. And he just took me by the hand, and we went in there in '86 and basically learned from Bob, Chuck, Joe the 3 guys on staff. Ledford, an Episcopalian, was the head chaplain at the time. But and there were 2 other guys too, but Bob, Chuck, and Joel really took me under their wing and walked with me through that place. And that I learned the craft firsthand from them. So I had good teachers, and I would love to take what they taught me and bring it to students and say, just think about this. You can do this. You just have to have the proper skills. And you have to have, I think, a passion for fringe. When I say fringe, it's the people in our society that people keep at arm's length. Homeless, poor, prison, immigrants. There are fringe people that we don't always pay attention to. And I think you have to have a heart for that. That's what Jesus did. I mean, he ate with the lepers. He ate with the prostitutes and thieves. That's what we're supposed to be about. So I think it's getting that message through too. It isn't just church on Sunday to people who look like you. It's everybody by the highways and byways, is what the New Testament says, that we are to be witnessing to. Okay, well, that's a good note to end on. That might be a good thing, John. I don't know. You're welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you.